The UFC 314 press conference just took place featuring Alexander Volkanovski, Diego Lopes, Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett, Yair Rodriguez, Patricio Pitbull, Bryce Mitchell, Jean Silva, Nikita Krylov and Dominic Reyes as well. And I'm going to give my reaction to what just went down. It was a quiet press conference to begin with. Not much was going on. Jean Silva was trying to get under Bryce Mitchell's skin, and Bryce Mitchell may just have the meanest microphone skills in the UFC because he was carrying the press conference early on, and other than Bryce Mitchell's one-liners, there was nothing really going on at the press conference. And then out of nowhere, the matchup I did not know I needed, but now I really badly want to happen somewhere down the line, came out of nowhere. Did I mention it came out of nowhere? I did not know there was this beef between Diego Lopes and Yair Rodriguez. That's going to be the main talking point of this video. Normally, I'd go through these press conferences chronologically, but I don't want to have you guys fall asleep by the halfway point until I finally get into what went down between Diego Lopes and Yair Rodriguez. They just went off. There was no sign of this. I had no idea this beef was there. They got provoked by a reporter who must have known there was this little bit of back and forth between them. But we didn't really know about it. I don't speak the language, of course, but I've had a few people give me the translated versions of what went down, and I have a decent idea of what they were arguing about. This runs deep. There's so much that goes into this. There's different storylines. There's little beef that's been going on for years. This is a generational beef. Their coaches have been beefing with each other. Now them as fighters are beefing with each other as well. Yair Rodriguez and Diego Lopes go off at the end. Now, this is how it started. It was all calm. I'm going to start with the Diego Lopes Yair Rodriguez stuff. It was all calm to begin with, okay? And then Yair Rodriguez, you know, he started mentioning a few things, and then out of nowhere, Diego Lopes says Taco Bell's mid. Out of nowhere! Like that's not going to set Yair Rodriguez off. Immediately, Yair Rodriguez is now on edge. And he's angry. But he doesn't say, let's fight. You know what I mean? Eventually, you could very clearly see him saying, let's fight. You know, I'll fight you right now if you want to. And that was after Diego Lopes took it to a different level. And he actually said the Crunchwrap Supreme was overrated. Out of nowhere. Diego Lopes starts mentioning that burritos should be considered sandwiches. And Yair's just flying off the handle on the other side of the press conference. This runs deep. Okay? It really does. And I didn't know there was... Okay, I'll tell you the serious... You know, yeah... Diego Lopes was saying Peso Pluma doesn't really have hits. He fell off. Peso Pluma fell off, he starts saying. And Yair Rodriguez starts reaching for weapons. Lifts up his chair. He can't take it anymore. No. I'll get into what really went down. Mexican drama. So, overall summary of the Diego Lopes and Yair Rodriguez beef at the UFC 314 press conference, from what I have been told, okay, because I've got a lot of Mexicans in my community. 30% of my audience are Mexicans. I don't know if you're aware of this, but that's true. So, they were filling me in. Pause. So, what kicked it off was Lopes commenting on how many losses Yair Rodriguez has. Then the reason it got heated, I think Yair was also asked on earlier in the week what he would think about Diego Lopes becoming a champion and becoming a Mexican champion in the UFC. And he said something about it being embarrassing or something like that. So Yair does have a problem with Diego Lopes being considered a Mexican. Even though Yair Rodriguez lives in Chicago and Diego Lopes lives in Mexico, of course, Yair was born and raised in Mexico. He's Mexican by ethnicity. And Diego Lopes was born and raised in Brazil. And then he moved to Mexico as a young man and sort of started living his MMA career in Mexico and adopted it as his nation. He was a model migrant is what he was, okay? Absolutely flawless. So Yair had a massive problem with that and doesn't consider him Mexican and doesn't like the fact that he tries to rep both nations. So that's something. That was also a message that went out. Apparently Tracy Cortez liked to post, another American, by the way, who's in America, in the USA. She also liked to post of Yair Rodriguez saying this or something along those lines. So there's been an active sort of rebellion by people living in the USA that are of Mexican heritage, trashing Diego Lopes for trying to consider himself Mexican or like represent Mexico as a fighter whilst living and training in Mexico full time. So that's one thing. So that's how it sort of, that's what's been brewing, I guess. What kicked it off was Lopez commenting how many losses Yair has, you know? Then the reason it got so heated, though, and turned up to another level is that there's this historic beef between their gyms, apparently. Yair's friend and former fighter UFC's Marco Beltran has had beef with Lopez's gym for years. So there's some, like, lineage to this, okay? So people that have, like, sort of coached Yair Rodriguez and been friends with him, that have trained in Mexico, have had problems with Diego Lopez's gym before, okay? This is also Alexa Grasso's gym, who may come into this at some point. I don't know. I'm not sure if anything was said about Alexa Grasso, but I think it's quite clear that maybe Lopez and Grasso, I don't want to put it out there, but I'm getting a hunch that maybe they're, you know, more than training partners, okay? So I'm not sure what to go off of with that. But that's what also I was told. Also allegations of Lopez's team, and this is what Yair Rodriguez was accusing him of, jumping a fighter that was... My video crashed, but I'm back. Apparently there were allegations of Diego Lopes and some teammates jumping a fighter from Yair Rodriguez's team. That's what Yair Rodriguez was talking to him about, or at least they cornered him and got heated with him and mistreated him when he was over there. And apparently Diego Lopes said back to Yair Rodriguez, I'm using the word apparently a lot here, but he then said back to Yair Rodriguez that teammate of Yair Rodriguez that was within his team's area had mistreated a woman in a gym. So that's why the team went after that teammate of Yair Rodriguez. So there's storyline to this, okay? And they got heated with each other. And not only did they have a lot to say, and Yair Rodriguez started to say, well, fight me right now, then I'll fight you right now if you want. And they started going back and forth. But after the press conference was over, they weren't done. This wasn't just, oh, let's do this for the show of the press conference. Once everyone started leaving the stage, they went over to each other, obviously with security separating them in the middle, and started proper going at each other again without the microphones. So there's real heated stuff going on here. So that's my assessment of the beef that was Diego Lopes versus Yair Rodriguez. It's been going on for a long time. Yair and other Mexican fighters of Mexican heritage that live in the USA are angry that Diego Lopes represents Mexico as a fighter while he lives and trains in Mexico full time in a Mexican gym in Mexico, did I mention? So they have a massive problem with that while they live in the USA. And that's interesting. So that's been going on. Then there's the beef where a coach of Yair Rodriguez or a friend of Yair Rodriguez as a former UFC fighter has had a problem with that gym for a long time. So it's kind of seeped down to Yair to have a problem with it as well. So that adds on to it. And then, of course, a situation where maybe a teammate of Yair that was over with Diego Lopes has been jumped, or a friend of Yair's that he's once trained with before was mistreated in a gym. But then Diego Lopes claiming back that the guy that they mistreated in a gym was someone who mistreated a woman in a gym, and that's why they mistreated him. So this is heated, and I really want to see this fight. I'll get into the rest of the press conference now, but I did not know that we needed this. So I don't know how this is going to happen, but if Yair has a really good performance against Pitbull, listen, Evloev's right there. You can't just leapfrog Evloev, which is a problem, of course. So I don't think it's going to happen if Diego Lopes wins the championship anytime soon. But if Diego loses to Volk, we now know the matchup if Yair Rodriguez does beat Pitbull this weekend. That's a big thing to overlook. Pitbull's very good. But if Yair wins and Diego Lopes loses, UFC, Guadalajara, Mexico, on that pay-per-view in September, this needs to be on the main card. Absolutely. So that's what that has just determined to me. But we'll see if that ends up aligning that way, because I think that Lopez is going to win. We move on, though, to more that happened at the press conference. Bryce Mitchell and Jean Silva. We ain't even got into that at all here. Bryce Mitchell and Jean Silva. By the way, I want to mention, Yair Rodriguez said at the start of the press conference that trash talking's not really his thing, and he doesn't like to talk trash. Just saying, Yair. Someone's going to cut that moment where he said that into him and Lopez standing up yapping at each other in Mexican gibberish. Okay? That's what's going to happen. Bryce Mitchell and Jean Silva beef. So, Mitchell also tried to get a prayer going before they started kicking off at each other, which was interesting to see. Mitchell's there, of course, I pray for anybody, and then all of a sudden these two are just yapping with each other. So Bryce Mitchell says in response to a brain damage threat from Jean Silva, I was born with brain damage, brother, I'll be all right. Now, Bryce Mitchell's won over the crowd. Not just from this moment, he got a cheer when he walked out as well. Jean Silva, I think he thought the crowd were more on his side than they actually were. There was actually a very awkward moment where there was about 12 people in the crowd barking. And it kind of didn't get the response that he wanted, and he hyped it up and built it up. We'll get to that in a second. But Bryce Mitchell was actually won over the crowd, especially during this press conference. By the end of it, they were cheering everything that he was saying. So that's now happened, okay? From the guy that's being booed and all the media members in the build-up are saying, what's it gonna be like for what you said when you get booed by the whole crowd? The crowd's now cheering Bryce, okay? I don't want to say it's all thanks to my hard work, but the narrative on Bryce Mitchell has surely changed, and people know he's a good guy, really. Okay? So that starts happening. He says, I was born with brain damage, brother. I'll be all right. Then Jean says he respects Bryce as a fighter. He just doesn't agree with anything that he says, which is interesting because Bryce says just a lot of Christian things, and Jean Silva's a Christian. But all good. Surely he agrees with some things that Bryce Mitchell says. But, of course, the more controversial things is what Jean Silva doesn't agree with, I guess. And then Jean gets like 10 guys in the crowd to bark after a 20-second build-up is what I've got written down here. He was really like... hold on, guys. It's going to be the big moment where you all bark with me. I'm a big superstar. I think Jean got a lot of cheers in the first press conference they did from people that just hated Bryce Mitchell. So he got the chant going of F Bryce Mitchell and all of this. In this one, he didn't really get the same pop from the crowd. So he's hyping up like they're all going to start barking again like they did last time. And a few people barked that were his fans, like Fighting Nerds fans in the crowd. It wasn't the whole crowd. You know what I mean? It was more of a Bryce Mitchell. They were cheering for Bryce Mitchell in this one is what I noticed. That was very different than the last press conference. So Jean started to try and get them to do that, and they didn't do it. As much as maybe you would want to. And he kind of looked defeated afterwards, like, I was expecting more of a pop for my big barking moment that I've got going on. And then once he starts getting them to bark, Bryce Mitchell says, I've put a lot of dogs down in my day. A lot of dogs have come around my farm trying to attack my family, trying to attack my animals, my livestock. And I'll tell you, they all do the same thing. They can bark all they want, but I put a lot of them down, and they all squeal before they die. And he starts, and the crowd erupts into cheers. Bryce Mitchell's dropping the one-liners of the year, of the decade at this press conference. Amazing work from Bryce Mitchell on the mic. Perfect counter-argument to, I mean, even when Jean Silva was barking before, you're barking up the wrong tree, motherfucker. And he starts going in on that. And then Jean Silva was talking about, because how Bryce mentioned, I don't know, Christian with a Lord tattooed across his chest, or you've got Lord tattooed across your chest or something. He then mentioned, Bryce Mitchell, you talk about Christianity, but you've got a gun on your shirt. So he's just trying to sort of go back at Bryce in that way. And Jean Silva then promises a knockout of Bryce. You need to look into my eyes, Bryce. I'm going to knock you out. And Bryce says, we'll see who stands victorious. So the crowd has now changed. It's not just Bryce is the bad guy, Jean's the good guy. It's now, actually, Bryce is cool as fuck. This is great. We're all hyped up for the fight. We're looking forward to it type of vibe. So there's now excitement. It's not just let's all boo Bryce because, we're good little guys. But anyway, we move on to the other people in the press conference that were randomly there annoyingly. Don't know why they were there. Okay? Chandler's generic rant listing the name of the card and the place in the arena, then saying Saturday night excitement or whatever, is what I had down. I've been here a lot of times, and I've said, I can't help but do the southern accent. He doesn't have that accent, but UFC 314, Madison Square, or whatever it is, Miami Staples Center, whatever the fuck the arena is, and live on pay-per-view. And then he also said that he's gonna, Scousers don't get knocked out. I'm gonna find Pimblett's chin in one round. In round one, he's gonna find the chin of Paddy Pimblett. And Pimblett says, lad, this chin's made of granite, lad. You know what I say, lad? This chin's made of granite, lad. You can't knock me out, lad. I've never been knocked out before, lad. But Chandler's been knocked out many times, lad. So I'm going to do it again, lad. So he starts going back at Chandler like, oh, you're going to knock me out? It's happened to you a lot. It's never happened to me. So that's their little back and forth that they had. They didn't really have too much to say. Even Volkanovski and... Volkanovski barely got a question. Until the end. Lopez, they were going to sum up the press conference. John Anik started saying anyone got a last question. And then all of a sudden, because Lopez and Yair went off, John Anik just said, any more questions? And just started like, oh, we've got energy finally in the press conference. Which was so good from John Anik, by the way. Respect to him for that. But he started sort of like, oh, okay, now there's energy. Let's get a few more questions for Volk. And Volk said, and still, baby, I'm coming back to get that belt. And he starts screaming about getting the belt. And everyone starts livening up a little bit. Even Chandler starts screaming at Paddy Pimblett as well. Both guys talk about Conor again. Pimblett just mentions, yeah, lad, if he watches, lad. McGregor's he there, lad. It's fine, lad. Whatever, lad. Molly, lad. All that, lad. Women need to stop talking, lad. Chandler needs to stop adopting, lad. And then Chandler says, I don't know if McGregor's ever going to make it through a training camp again, but I know that I've been here before, and I've done this and that in this promotion, and I've had this many fights in this many months, and I've shown up every time, and just starts listing things and doing Chandler stuff with his speeches that he does. Nikita Krylov's now repping Russia, I guess. He was once repping Ukraine. He's from the Donbass region, which used to be Ukraine, I guess. His flag is now the Russian flag. Hey, he's doing what he needs to do to get by. Ain't nothing wrong with that, Krylov. Don't feel any shame about that, brother, hey. Krylov just doing what he has to do to get by, it seems. Tough to see, but there you go. That's interesting. And then he said, have you ever seen a boring fight with me? Someone said, you've been out for a long time. Are you worried that, you're going to have jitters or something like that? And Krylov starts fights with jumping front kicks to the face. Like, I don't know why no one respects Krylov the same way I do. I love Nikita Krylov. He is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. And he always performs at light heavyweight and he always entertains. So he always gets stuck in immediately in fights with a big head kick and some big flurry of punches. Like, I'm looking forward to Krylov's fight. And then Dominic Reyes came back and said some like, what's up, Miami? What's up? I'm not back. I'm better. And he expected a cheer and it didn't. It was kind of a moment where he was expecting a cheer for everything he said. And it was cool though. You know what I mean? He had some lines. I'm just surfing the wave in Miami and a lot of emotions going into this fight. And I'm more ready than ever to prove that I still got it and go to war. And that's what he kind of had to say. And then that was it. There was only like one question for a lot of the fighters because most of the reporters then targeted on Lopez and Yair and, Bryce Mitchell and Jean Silva. When they noticed there was beef, they targeted the beef, which I thought was an adjustment by the MMA media once they realized there was some interest there. Pitbull got asked a few questions as well. Yair got asked about Pitbull, said, he's respects Pitbull as a champion and, he's had great wins outside the UFC. And Pitbull had some one-liners to no reaction from the crowd. I'm the best featherweight in the world and I'll prove it. And then everyone just was dead silent. And he was like, I've done this before. I know this is going to be easy for me. I can't wait to go out there and perform and take his head off or something. I don't know. He was saying some like one-liners and the crowd was just... I don't even know if the UFC crowd knows who Pitbull is, which is kind of crazy, but they had no response to him at all. Volkanovski saying he's in the best shape he's ever been in, which is true. That's something I wanted to talk about. I've picked Lopez in the build-up for this fight. Volk has achieved a different level of shape than we've ever seen him in UFC featherweight history. At lightweight, he was a bit chubby because he's moving up in weight and he's not going to be as lean, of course. At featherweight, we've never seen Volkanovski this lean. He was the leanest I've ever seen him. He's lean and mean for this fight. Volkanovski, shredded. I've been seeing like clips of him and embedded and stuff training, and I've just been like, what the? Volk is lean. This guy's leaner than I've ever seen him before. In a weird way, his face looks a little bit too lean, in a way. So Volk's definitely putting everything into this fight and cutting no corners, which makes me worry for my Lopez pick. But hey, we'll see how it goes down. Other than that, Chandler yapped something generic about, I don't have jingles like a car insurance company, or a cheap Modelo this, or a commercial this, and a this, and a that, and a this, and just Chandler shit, man. Fucking lame. I hope Pimblett sleeps him. But yeah, there you go. Good card. Everyone was going back and forth a little bit. It all kicked off at the end with Lopez and Yair. But yeah, Lopez and Yair, man. I need that fight now. I didn't know I needed that fight, but that is a perfect beef to kick off. Once, we're going back to Guadalajara. Well, we're not going back. But, most people don't go back to Mexico. Either way, all good. They're going to Guadalajara, Mexico in September for a pay-per-view. So, with this kicking off, they're definitely going to be hoping that will align for that card. So we'll see how it goes down. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip, I'll see you later. Goodbye. Great press conference. Bryce wins over the crowd. Lopez and Yair go back and forth. The rest of the guys up there say some generic stuff, but hey, it was fun. Goodbye.